Warning. The following video contains strong language that some viewers may find offensive or disturbing.
Who is the stranger that you have only seen, meet once in your life that you still think about time to time? I met my husband's doppelganger once. The man looked exactly like my husband. I was with someone at the hospital waiting for their medical transport to pick us up, and I saw who I thought was my husband across the street. My husband was supposed to be at work, so I was confused. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. My patient and I walked over to him, but I stopped short a few feet away because I started to realize maybe it wasn't actually him. His clothes were different and this man was assisting someone in caregiving type role. My husband absolutely would not do that. The guy noticed me staring at him, and so I explained why and even showed him a picture of my husband. He swore that was a picture of him and this was all some practical joke. I had to show him pictures of my husband and I together for him to realize the pictures were not of him. This man could have been his identical twin. I often think of that encounter and how insane it was. I also think of the astronomical chances that not only did my husband have a doppelganger but that we lived in the same city for a while and I happened to cross paths with him. An old man I overheard telling his grandkids that if their dad got accepted to the job he was interviewing for in town, they would move there and then they could visit each other all the time. I never even saw the guy interviewing for the job, but I really hope he got it. I met a man at a Wendy's at like 9:55 at night while I was working at Books A Million. I was 19 years old, starving, and had 30 minutes to get in, scarf down a small burger, and get back. The man came out, introduced himself as Mr. Lemonade, and informed me that he was off his meds. Then he left. Wherever Mr. Lemonade is now, I hope he's well and back on his meds. Years ago when I worked at Lowe's, a customer told me in great detail about how he fell through a rotting deck but landed with a joist between his legs and had to go to the dick doctor. 1986. A year after graduating from a tiny college on Idaho, I was at Disneyland with a high school buddy. I was totally convinced that I saw a college friend, Adam, in line at Pirates of the Caribbean. I kept waving at him, but he looked at me like I was out of my mind. My high school friend tried to talk me down, saying that Adam clearly had no idea who I was. It's not him. Everyone has a twin. Yada, yada, yada. The line finally snakes around to where I am standing right next to Adam, so I tap him on the shoulder and ask, "Hey, aren't you Adam M?" And he says, "No, I'm his twin brother Aaron." 34 years later and I still tell that story at parties. I only met Aaron once, in 1986, in line at Pirates, but I do wish him and Adam a very happy birthday on Facebook. Once I was walking to work past a homeless shelter pickup spot. It was a sunny day, middle of summer. A small lady was standing on the sidewalk wearing rain boots, a yellow raincoat, and wrapped completely in a blue vinyl tarp. As I walked by her, she leaned into me, looked me in the eye and said, "Fish monster." I still think about her. Did she think I was a fish monster? Was she concerned that I had seen a fish monster? Perhaps she felt I was unprepared, and her questioning tone was more about if I'd heard about the potential of fish monsters. Such a surreally complex interaction in just 2 words. One thing I know for certain is that whatever the fish monster status was, she was clearly the best prepared of everyone present. Not a complete stranger but a classmate in my first year at uni. We shared some classes but didn't really spoke to each other beside the casual greetings. One morning she got a call on her cell phone, came back to the classroom visibly upset to gather her things and left. I never saw her again after that. Still think randomly about it sometimes. 14 years later. When I was fresh out of college I drove over 2 hours away for a job interview and got into a car accident like a block away from the building. My car was completely totaled. A woman who was stopped at the stop sign near my accident pulled over and got out to make sure I was okay. I was completely fine physically but have very bad anxiety and immediately had a panic attack. I was sobbing and couldn't catch my breath, and this complete stranger sat with me the entire time telling me to breathe and just being so caring and supportive. She waited with me for the police to come. She helped me talk them through what happened. She called my mom for me. She even called the office I was on my way to so she could let them know about the accident and that I would call them to reschedule my interview. As if that wasn't enough. Once she found out that I was that far away from home and it was going to take my mom 2 hours to get to me, she canceled her meeting that she was already late to so she could drive me halfway. She did not think it was a big deal whatsoever. She just stepped up to the plate to help without question. I would have been completely alone and lost without her that day. She was an angel, honestly. I lost her business card between all the paperwork from the accident and I've been kicking myself over it for the last 5 years. All I want is to call her and tell her how thankful I am and that I've kept her in my thoughts ever since. Roxanne, if you're out there, thank you so much. And please, for the love of God, send me your last name so I can send you some flowers. I was having a rough day and I thought I'd get an ice cream to cheer myself up. I was standing in the line and this old lady looked at me and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine and just had a rough day. I got up to the front to get my ice cream and she tells the cashier, "I've got this young man. He's had a rough day." She smiles at me and says, "Enjoy your ice cream." I still think of her whenever I have a rough day. I send her my good vibes. When I was a kid, I flew by myself for the first time. At the airport, when I was about to check in, I spotted an elderly lady looking at me deeply. At first I thought I accidentally hit her or something. So I asked if she needed anything. She nodded. Didn't give it much importance, so I just checked in and headed to my plane. Later, already on the plane, I see the very same lady looking for her seat. Of course I helped her and asked her what number her seat was. She handed me her ticket. B37. I'll never forget it because I was the C37. She sat right next to me. I was scared. I was a kid, and I wasn't used to coincidences. Anyway, long flight. When we arrived and were waiting for the plane to land for us to head out, she finally says, "You know, you really look like my daughter. I even thought you were her. But she passed away 5 years ago. Silly me. Here, this is her with my grandkids." She handed me her phone with a zoomed-in picture. I was paralyzed when I saw her. She looked exactly like me. But she was 28 and I was 10. I couldn't even talk. Now that I am older, every time I look in the mirror for my birthday, I remember that lady in the picture. I am a living photo of her daughter. Every year that goes by is a year that I look more like that woman in the picture. When I turn 28, I hope this memory will finally scare me less. I was on my way back from Disneyland Paris. Sat in the airport and a guy beside me was typing away on his laptop. A little curious at what he was writing, I peeked over and saw the title, "The Last Letter I'll Ever Write." I was frozen for a few minutes. I am 24 and I had absolutely no idea what to do. I thought maybe he was a writer and if I ask it'll look stupid. Eventually though I turned round to him and said, "Look man, I really hope I'm making a fool of myself. But are you okay?" Turns out he and his long-term partner had broken up. And they were meant to be coming on this holiday. That he'd now come on with his dad. He blamed himself. And he'd been going to therapy for a while to get out of a pretty dark place, but some days were better than others. And writing the letters was an exercise from his therapist. We chatted for a bit. About her, his dad, me, life in general. Turned out his brother lived nearby me and frequented a coffee shop right by where I used to live. Eventually my plane got called. And we hugged and I told him I really hope things get better for him and that at the very least I'd had a lovely time talking to him. We left there and I still wonder what happened to him. I hope he's happy now. I hope that he's managed to find some good in the world again. But I guess I'll never know for sure. When I was young, maybe 5, my mom got really sick and was screaming in pain as she drove me and herself to the hospital. No one else was with us. When we got there, she passed out in the car. I ran up to the hospital and got a wheelchair. She managed to somehow flop herself into the chair and passed out again. The hospital was uphill, and I was too weak to push her, she was too heavy. A stranger came out of nowhere, wheeled her in and made enough ruckus to get her immediate attention. She spent the next 2 months in the hospital. I never saw that guy again. But I think about him all the time and I'd like to thank him one day. Edit, for all of the people wondering. What ended up happening was her small intestine and large intestine disconnected. She was not allowed any food or water by mouth, literally anything, for 2 weeks. The most she could do was wet her lips with a sponge. To this day, they are not sure what it is. She's been to plenty of different specialists and they honestly still don't know why it happened at all. She's been having intestinal problems since she was a young girl. Her first surgery was when she was a few months old. When she came home from the hospital she was about 70-something pounds. I remember because I said, "Look. Mommy and I are almost the same weight." Single quote closing parenthesis dot. That's really all of the information I have about it. If you guys are interested I can ask for more information or make this a whole post somewhere. When I was in Iraq in 2003, we were partnered with some local police. Their compound was a secure area, and no unauthorized people were allowed in. There was this little girl, probably about 7 to 9 years old, that sold bananas and was allowed in or out whenever she wanted. I hope she's doing well. I once saw my exact double in a Barnes & Noble. We saw each other from a far distance. Locked eyes. Gave a slow head nod to each other. And kept going without saying a word. Sometimes I wonder how he is doing. An old lady who lived next door to me and had a key from the past renter. She walked into my place and made us breakfast thinking I was the same lady who lived there previously. She didn't realize I was a different person. We talked about her grandson joining the police academy and she was worried but proud of him. She died that night. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notification button. See you next time.